Keir Starmer, nicknamed Two-Tier Keir, stood grinning like an idiot as he proudly announced a new trade deal with India. A trade deal that allows Indians to come to the UK and work here without having to pay national insurance. I read this from the Daily Mail, and I quote, "Sir Keir Starmer faced a furious backlash today after it emerged he is handing Indian workers in the UK and their employers a major tax exemption to secure a trade deal. As part of the UK-India trade deal, Indian nationals on temporary visas and their firms will not have to pay national insurance contributions in both countries for the first 3 years. The change is understood to be a key demand by Indian negotiators who said the agreement, which has been 3 years in the making, will result in significant financial gains for Indian companies." End quote. Now firstly, before we get into this and the effects it will have, we first need to understand how national insurance works and how both British workers and firms pay national insurance. National insurance is paid by both employees and employers. It is also paid for by those who are self-employed. However, what we are looking at here is those who are in employment. At the moment, employers have to pay national insurance at 15% on salaries above £5,000. This rate has recently risen under Labour from 13.8%, and that's important to note, because effectively, Labour had just made it more expensive to employ British workers even before this trade deal was finalised. Bear that in mind as we move forward. Employees also pay national insurance, with those who earn over £242 per week paying part of their wage as a national insurance contribution, which increases depending on how much they earn. In short, a national insurance payment is made up of a contribution from both the employee and the employer, which means that this new trade deal not only makes Indians working in Britain better off than British workers, but it also means that employers who choose to employ Indian workers over Brits become instantly more profitable. If a company currently employs a team of British workers, that company will pay 15% in national insurance contributions on all salaries over £5,000. If that company was to sack those workers and employ Indians under this new trade deal, that tax burden would be immediately removed and the company would be financially better off. This is a clear incentive to sack British workers and replace them with migrants. If a company currently employs a team of British workers and wishes to expand its workforce, hiring British workers is now more expensive, so there is a clear pressure placed upon that firm to expand its workforce with foreign labour, specifically with workers from India, as they are cheaper to employ. Finally, if a company does employ a mixture of Indian and British workers, and those workers are all paid the same salaries, the Indian workers go home with more money at the end of each month, because they are exempt from national insurance contributions, another example of Labour's two-tier Britain. And to make things worse, despite not paying national insurance, those Indian workers would still be able to use the National Health Service and other benefits which national insurance contributions are supposed to pay for, meaning that these foreign workers are getting all the benefits of living in Britain with none of the costs. This will essentially make British workers second-class workers, reducing the likelihood of British workers being employed and ensuring that when they are employed, they earn less than their Indian counterparts. But one thing that most people wanted to know was, would the trade deal increase immigration? And the government had a couple of things to say about this. At first, the government said that the deal did not include any changes to immigration policy. This was an attempt to make people believe that the policy wouldn't affect immigration numbers. However, this was soon dialed back when the UK's Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, said the following, and I quote, "It opens up a small number of visas from an existing route for chefs and musicians and yoga teachers. Very, very small, about 1,800. End quote. So at first the New Deal wasn't going to affect immigration, then it would, but only by a small number. This is of course all misdirection, as this trade deal will absolutely affect migration numbers and will likely lead to a rise in Indian workers coming to the UK. Immigration is of course based on push and pull factors, and a major pull factor is companies wishing to employ overseas workers and offering them jobs. At the moment, Britain has a points-based immigration system, and those applying for a UK skilled worker visa are assessed under this system. To obtain a skilled worker visa, applicants must score a minimum of 70 points for their application to be considered. The points are awarded based on a number of different criteria, one of which is whether the applicant has a certificate of sponsorship from an employer. As this trade deal means that companies can effectively reduce their tax burden by importing Indian workers, it is obvious that companies will now start looking to India to find workers who are willing to migrate here and do everything in their power to facilitate that move by issuing certificates of sponsorship. This will of course lead to an increase in Indian migration. This is an important lesson in how the government lies to you. Whilst it is correct to state that this particular deal doesn't change migration law, that of course doesn't mean it won't increase immigration. This deal will absolutely increase immigration from India as it creates the pull factor mentioned earlier. Not only will immigration increase, but those migrants will easily be able to outcompete British workers for jobs as they are cheaper to employ. This will not only further white replacement, but it will also increase white unemployment and leave Brits who are in employment earning less than their new Indian co-workers. But wait 1 second. Not everyone was unhappy about this deal. Let's hear what Conservative Party hero Jacob Rees-Mogg had to say about this. He tweeted the following, and I quote, "Cheaper food and drink including rice and tea, footwear and clothing thanks to a welcome trade deal with India. Exactly what Brexit promised." End quote. Yes, this is great for Britain. Don't worry guys, it's all fine. We will be reduced to a minority even faster, but at least rice, tea and cheaply produced sweatshop clothing will be slightly cheaper. Imagine celebrating at the thought of becoming a racial minority because the supposed payoff is that bags of rice will be a couple of pence cheaper. Do you really think this is what people who voted for Brexit were asking for? What a complete wanker.